The courtroom had never felt so cold, even under the weight of August heat pressing against its vaulted windows. When privilege walks through mahogany doors believing itself untouchable, the air itself seems to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when arrogance meets consequence. If you believe justice should be blind to power and wealth, hit that like button right now. Madison Hartwell entered courtroom 6 like she owned not just the building, but the entire concept of accountability itself. 23 years old, blonde hair swept into a careless ponytail that probably cost more to style than most people's monthly rent, wearing a cream-colored designer suit that screamed money louder than any words could. Her heels clicked against the marble floor with a rhythm that suggested she'd walked into country clubs and governor's mansions her entire life, which she had. Behind her trailed 2 attorneys in suits so expensive they looked like they'd been sewn from liquidated justice itself, and beside them, her father's chief of staff, a man whose job description apparently included making criminal charges disappear like morning fog. Madison didn't walk to the defendant's table. She sauntered. She smiled at the stenographer. She examined her nails. She checked her phone twice before her lead attorney, Richard Pemberton, a man who'd made millions defending the indefensible, gently suggested she put it away. She rolled her eyes like a teenager asked to clean her room. Judge Elias Monroe sat elevated above this theater of privilege, a figure carved from integrity and decades of seeing through every performance the wealthy and powerful had ever staged in his courtroom. 64 years old, with silver hair cut military short, lines etched around his eyes from years of studying truth and lies across the distance between his bench and the witness stand. He wore his black robes the way some men wear armor, not for show, but as a uniform of duty. His hands, weathered and steady, rested on the bench before him. He hadn't spoken yet. He was observing, measuring, watching Madison Hartwell treat his courtroom like an inconvenient appointment before lunch. The gallery was packed. News cameras lined the back wall despite the prosecution's request to limit media access. This was the daughter of Governor Thomas Hartwell, a man currently serving his 2nd term, a man whose political machine had crushed opponents and critics with equal efficiency. Madison's arrest 3 months earlier had dominated headlines for a week before mysteriously vanishing from front pages, replaced by stories about education reform and infrastructure bills. Money and power had a way of controlling narratives. Until now, they'd controlled this one too. The charges were simple in their horror: vehicular manslaughter while driving under the influence, leaving the scene of an accident, and obstruction of justice. The victim was Miguel Santos, a 51-year-old construction worker, father of 3, husband to Maria, who'd been crossing an intersection on his way home from a double shift when Madison's Mercedes SUV, going 60 in a 35 zone, her blood alcohol level twice the legal limit, struck him with enough force to throw his body 30 feet. She'd stopped for 4 seconds. Security footage from a nearby convenience store showed her brake lights illuminate, showed her looking back through her rear window, showed her making a phone call, showed her driving away. Miguel Santos died on that street corner before the ambulance arrived, his lunchbox still clutched in his hand, a birthday card for his daughter inside it. Madison had been arrested 6 hours later at her father's mansion, showered and changed, her attorney already present, claiming she'd panicked, hadn't realized she'd hit anything, thought maybe she'd struck a pothole or debris. The SUV had been discovered in a private garage being detailed by staff who conveniently couldn't remember who'd authorized the work. 2 months of legal maneuvering had followed, motions to suppress evidence, challenges to the arresting officer's probable cause, attempts to exclude the security footage on technical grounds, every trick in the expensive legal playbook deployed with the confidence of people who'd never lost a battle against consequences. But Judge Monroe had denied every motion, rejected every challenge. And now, on this August morning, with sunlight streaming through high windows, illuminating dust particles that hung in the air like suspended judgment, the trial was finally beginning. "All rise," the bailiff announced, though Judge Monroe was already seated, having entered through his chamber's door while Madison was still scrolling through her phone. The courtroom stood. Madison stood last, slowly, with the enthusiasm of someone being asked to participate in something beneath her station. Judge Monroe's eyes found her across the distance. Dark eyes, patient eyes, eyes that had seen every brand of arrogance and entitlement parade through his courtroom over 32 years on the bench. He didn't speak immediately. The silence stretched. Attorneys shifted their weight. The stenographer's hands hovered over her machine. Madison examined a cuticle. "Ms. Hartwell," Judge Monroe's voice cut through the quiet like a blade through silk, not loud, but absolute. "You will look at me when I'm addressing you in my courtroom." Madison's head snapped up, irritation flashing across her face before she could control it. She met his gaze with something that tried to be defiance but landed closer to petulance. "Yes, Your Honor," she said, the title dripping from her mouth like an insult she was forced to swallow. "You will put your phone in your purse, you will close your purse, and you will not touch it again until I dismiss this court for recess." "Do you understand?" Richard Pemberton stood immediately, his voice smooth as aged bourbon. "Your Honor, if I may, my client meant no disrespect. Mr. Pemberton, I did not ask you. I asked your client, Ms. Hartwell. Do you understand my instruction?" Madison stared at Judge Monroe for 3 full seconds, long enough that her own attorney touched her elbow in warning. Finally, with movements that suggested she was granting an enormous favor, she dropped her phone into her bag and pushed it away. "Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Please be seated." The courtroom settled. Assistant District Attorney Sarah Chen rose from the prosecution table, a woman in her late 30s who'd built her reputation taking on cases other prosecutors considered too politically dangerous to touch. She wore a simple black suit, no jewelry except a watch. Her dark hair pulled back in a style that said she hadn't spent 15 seconds that morning thinking about anything except the facts she was about to present. She carried no notes as she approached the jury box. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Sarah began, her voice clear and steady, "this case is about choices. It's about the choice Madison Hartwell made to drink 7 vodka cocktails at the Platinum Lounge on the evening of May 14th. It's about her choice to get behind the wheel of her Mercedes SUV, despite being, by her own admission to friends that night, definitely too drunk to drive, but it's fine. It's about her choice to check her Instagram while accelerating through a red light at 60 miles per hour. It's about her choice, when she felt her vehicle strike something, to look back, see Miguel Santos's body in the street, and make one more choice, to call her father's chief of staff before she called 911, to drive away, to go home, to shower, to let a man die alone on cold concrete while she worried about herself. Sarah paused, letting silence amplify her words. And this case is about Miguel Santos, who didn't get to make any choices that night, who didn't choose to die, who didn't choose to leave his wife a widow, who didn't choose to leave his 3 children without a father, who simply chose to walk home from work, chose to cross a street in a crosswalk with the light in his favor, chose to carry a birthday card for his daughter Rosa's 15th birthday, and paid for Madison Hartwell's choices with his life. Madison yawned. Actually yawned, covering her mouth with her hand, but deliberately, visibly, as if Sarah's words were boring her. Several jurors' expressions hardened. Richard Pemberton's jaw tightened, but he didn't look at his client. Judge Monroe's gaze remained steady on Madison, measuring, cataloging, remembering. Sarah continued, laying out the evidence with surgical precision. The security footage showing Madison's SUV speeding through the intersection. The timestamp showing the red light. The witness testimony from 6 people who'd been at the Platinum Lounge that night, 3 of whom had tried to convince Madison to let them call a car service. The phone records showing Madison called her father's chief of staff 37 seconds after impact and spoke for 4 minutes before driving away. The medical examiner's testimony that Miguel Santos was alive for approximately 6 minutes after impact and might have survived with immediate medical attention. The forensic evidence from Madison's SUV showing impact patterns consistent with striking a human body, debris, and biological material the detail crew hadn't managed to eliminate despite their efforts. Madison examined her nails through all of it. She whispered to her attorney twice. She shifted in her chair like the wooden seat was an affront to her comfort. When Sarah presented a photo of Miguel Santos, smiling in a family photo, his arm around his wife, his children gathered close, Madison looked away, toward the windows, as if the sight of a dead man's happiness was an inconvenience she shouldn't have to endure. The first day proceeded with testimony from witnesses at the Platinum Lounge. A bartender who'd served Madison 6 vodka sodas and watched her order another from a server. Friends who'd partied with her, who testified under oath that Madison had said, direct quote, "I'm definitely too drunk to drive, but it's fine. Cops don't pull over cars like mine." A valet who'd suggested Madison take an Uber and been told, "Mind your own business. I'm fine." Richard Pemberton cross-examined with surgical skill, trying to establish that Madison hadn't seemed impaired, that alcohol affects everyone differently, that perhaps the witnesses were misremembering or exaggerating. But the facts were concrete. The bartender had written Madison's order down on receipts time-stamped with her credit card transactions. The blood alcohol test administered 6 hours after the accident, after hours for alcohol to metabolize, still showed her at Darrow 9, meaning at the time of impact she'd been at least at 15, nearly twice the legal limit. Through it all, Madison maintained her mask of bored indifference. When court recessed for the day, she immediately grabbed her phone, scrolled through it while walking out, laughing at something on her screen while Miguel Santos's widow sat in the front row of the gallery, tears streaming silently down her face. The second day brought the security footage. The prosecution played it on screens, visible to the entire courtroom. The timestamp in the corner, Miguel Santos entering the frame, crossing the street in the crosswalk, the pedestrian signal showing white. Madison's black Mercedes SUV appearing from the left, no brake lights, no indication of slowing, speeding through the red light. The impact, Miguel's body thrown into the air, landing hard. The SUV's brake lights illuminating. 4 seconds of stopped vehicle. A figure visible through the back window turned, looking back. Then the SUV driving away, turning right at the next corner, disappearing. The courtroom sat in absolute silence after the video ended. Sarah Chen let that silence breathe. Let every person in the room sit with what they'd just witnessed. Then she played it again. And once more, after that. Madison stared at the table in front of her, jaw tight, neck flushed red. Her mask of boredom had cracked, replaced with something harder to read. Anger, maybe. Or shame that disguised itself as anger because shame was unfamiliar territory. The medical examiner testified next. Patricia Owens, 40 years of experience, had performed Miguel Santos's autopsy. She explained in clinical detail the injuries he'd sustained. Massive internal bleeding, fractured ribs, ruptured spleen, traumatic brain injury. And then, with her voice never wavering but her eyes finding Madison's with laser precision, she said, "Mr. Santos was alive when Ms. Hartwell drove away. His injuries were severe, but with immediate medical attention, he had an estimated 40 to 60% chance of survival. The delay in receiving emergency care eliminated that chance." Richard Pemberton objected, arguing speculation. Judge Monroe overruled, noting that expert medical testimony regarding survivability wasn't speculation, but professional analysis based on evidence. The testimony stood. Maria Santos testified on the third day. 50 years old. A woman whose grief had carved itself into every line of her face. She wore black, sat straight in the witness chair, and answered Sarah Chen's questions in accented English, her voice never rising but carrying a weight that made grown men in the jury box wipe their eyes. "Tell us about Miguel," Sarah said gently. Maria's hands folded in her lap. "Miguel was a good man. He worked construction for 26 years. He came to this country with nothing, built a life for us. He worked 2 jobs so our children could go to college. Rosa, our oldest, she wants to be a teacher. Miguel was so proud. He bought her a card for her birthday, wrote inside it about how proud he was. She found it in his lunchbox at the hospital. That was the last thing he wrote. What did Miguel's life mean to you? Everything." The word came out broken. "He was my husband for 29 years, my best friend, the father of my children. He worked so hard so we could have a good life. And this girl," Maria's voice finally rose, her eyes finding Madison at the defense table. "This girl who has everything, who never worked a hard day in her life, she took him from us like he was nothing, like his life meant nothing, and she didn't even stop. She looked back and saw him and drove away like he was trash in the street." "Objection," Pemberton said, standing. "Speculation about what my client saw or knew." "Sustained," Judge Monroe said quietly. "Mrs. Santos, please limit your testimony to what you know directly." "I know my husband is dead," Maria said, her eyes still locked on Madison. "I know she killed him. I know she didn't stop. I know she called her father before she called for help. I know these things are facts, and I know she doesn't care. Look at her, she doesn't care." Madison was looking down at the table, jaw clenched, but her eyes were dry. No tears, no remorse visible on her face. Just that same angry tension, the look of someone furious at being held accountable. The fourth day brought the phone records and the testimony of Detective James Morrison, the investigator who'd built the case. He walked the jury through every call made from Madison's phone that night. The call to her father's chief of staff at 11:47 p.m., 37 seconds after impact, lasting 4 minutes and 12 seconds. The call to her father at 11:52 p.m., lasting 7 minutes. The call to Richard Pemberton at 12:03 a.m., lasting 11 minutes. The first call to 911, never made, not by Madison. The 911 call had come from a witness at 11:48 p.m., while Madison was on the phone with her father's chief of staff, already constructing her defense. Detective Morrison also testified about the obstruction of justice charge. How, when he'd arrived at the governor's mansion with a warrant for Madison's arrest, he'd found the SUV already being detailed. How 3 staffers initially claimed they didn't know whose vehicle it was or who'd authorized the work. How phone records showed Madison's father had made 6 phone calls to various attorneys and staff members between 11:52 p.m. and 12:30 a.m. How the detail crew had used industrial-strength cleaners specifically designed to eliminate biological evidence. In your professional opinion, Detective Morrison, Sarah Chen asked, was this obstruction of justice planned and deliberate? Absolutely. This wasn't panic or confusion. This was a coordinated effort to destroy evidence and construct a defense, initiated within minutes of the incident. Richard Pemberton's cross-examination attacked the chain of custody, the warrant's specificity, the reliability of phone timestamps. But the facts remained immovable. The evidence was preserved. The timeline was clear. The obstruction was documented. Throughout all of this testimony, through 4 days of evidence and witnesses and documented proof of her guilt, Madison Hartwell maintained her performance of indifference. She whispered to her attorneys. She sighed audibly during testimony she found tedious. She checked her smartwatch repeatedly. Once, when Maria Santos broke down crying on the stand describing finding out her husband was dead, Madison rolled her eyes so visibly that 2 jurors saw it, and Judge Monroe made a note on his legal pad. On the 5th day, the defense presented its case. Richard Pemberton was a master of his craft, and he deployed every tool he possessed. He called a toxicology expert who testified that blood alcohol calculations 6 hours after consumption were inherently unreliable, that Madison could have been below the legal limit at the time of the accident. Sarah Chen's cross-examination destroyed that theory with simple math and established medical science, but Pemberton had planted seeds of doubt where he could. He called witnesses who testified that Madison was a good person, charitable, kind to animals, volunteer work on her resume. Sarah's cross-examination established that the volunteer work consisted of attending 2 charity galas and posting photos on Instagram. The charitable donations were made by her father in her name. The kindness was theoretical. Pemberton argued that the delay in calling 911 wasn't callousness, but shock and panic. That Madison, having never been in such a situation, hadn't processed what happened. That her first instinct was to call her father, as any frightened daughter might. That the decision to leave the scene was wrong, but understandable in a state of trauma and confusion. It was masterful lawyering applied to an unsympathetic client and overwhelming evidence. And then, on the afternoon of the 5th day, Richard Pemberton made a choice that would define the trial's conclusion. He called Madison Hartwell to testify in her own defense. The courtroom seemed to lean forward collectively. Madison stood, smoothed her suit jacket, this one a pale blue that probably cost what Miguel Santos earned in a month, and walked to the witness stand. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat with her legs crossed, one hand draped casually over the arm of the chair. Richard Pemberton approached her with the gentleness of a father with a daughter, his voice warm and supportive. Madison, I know this has been difficult for you. Can you tell the jury, in your own words, what happened on the night of May 14th? Madison took a breath, and when she spoke, her voice carried a rehearsed quality, words she'd practiced with her legal team. I had been out with friends that night. We were celebrating my friend Chelsea's birthday at the Platinum Lounge. I had a few drinks, yes, but I didn't feel impaired. I've always been able to handle alcohol well. When it was time to leave, I felt fine to drive. I know people say I shouldn't have, but in that moment, I genuinely believed I was okay. What happened when you were driving home? I was going through an intersection and I felt something. Like I'd hit a pothole, maybe, or debris in the road. My car jolted. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw something in the street, but it was dark, and I couldn't tell what it was. I was confused and honestly scared. My first thought was to call my dad. I know that might not make sense to everyone, but when something scary happens, I call my father. That's what I did. Did you know you'd hit a person? No, not then. I thought maybe I'd hit an animal or construction equipment, something. I didn't know. I was panicking. My dad told me to come home, that we'd figure it out. So I did. When did you learn you'd struck Miguel Santos? Madison's eyes actually welled with tears, the first emotion beyond boredom and irritation she'd displayed all trial. When the police came to the house, when they told me someone had died, I was horrified. I couldn't believe it. I would never, ever intentionally hurt anyone. This has been the worst experience of my life. Pemberton let that statement hang in the air for a moment, then nodded sympathetically. Madison, do you feel remorse for what happened to Miguel Santos? Of course I do, every day. I think about his family. I wish I could take it back. I wish none of this had happened. Pemberton returned to his seat, his performance complete. And then Sarah Chen stood for cross-examination, and the temperature in the courtroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sarah approached the witness stand slowly, carrying a folder, her expression neutral. She stopped 6 feet from Madison and stood in silence for a moment, just looking at her. Madison shifted in her seat, her mask of rehearsed remorse already beginning to crack under scrutiny. Miss Hartwell, Sarah began, her voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. You testified that you had a few drinks that night. How many is a few? I don't remember exactly. 3 or 4 maybe. You don't remember exactly? Sarah opened her folder, removed a paper. Your credit card statement shows charges for 7 drinks. The bartender testified you ordered 6 directly from him and 1 from a server. That's 7 drinks in 3 hours. Does that refresh your memory? Madison's jaw tightened. Maybe it was 7. I wasn't counting. You weren't counting. Did you also not count when you texted your friend Brittany? And I'm reading directly from the text messages entered as evidence. I'm so wasted right now, LOL. Was that before or after you stopped counting? Objection, Pemberton said. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Monroe said. Ms. Chen, please rephrase. Ms. Hartwell, did you send that text message at 11:23 p.m., approximately 15 minutes before you got in your car? Madison's face flushed red. Yes. And you testified you felt fine to drive? I felt okay in that moment. You felt okay despite texting that you were so wasted? Despite the valet suggesting you take an Uber? Despite your friend Madison trying to call a car service for you? I thought I was fine. Sarah nodded slowly, let the contradiction sit. You testified you thought you'd hit a pothole or debris. Ms. Hartwell, have you ever actually hit a pothole? Yes, of course. Did it sound like this? Sarah pressed play on an audio file. The enhanced audio from the security footage, the sickening thud of vehicle hitting flesh and bone, the crunch of impact. Madison flinched. Several jurors looked away. Does that sound like a pothole to you? I don't know. In the moment, I didn't know what it was. But you stopped. The video shows you stopped for 4 seconds. You looked back. What did you see when you looked back? It was dark. I couldn't see clearly. The street was illuminated by 2 streetlights. The security footage shows clear visibility. I'll ask again. What did you see? Madison's composure was fracturing, anger leaking through the cracks. I saw something in the street. I didn't know what it was. Something? The footage shows Miguel Santos's body, clearly visible, in the middle of the crosswalk. You're asking this jury to believe you couldn't identify a human being. I was in shock. You were in shock, but you had the presence of mind to call your father's chief of staff? Not 911? Not for help for whatever you'd hit? You called a political operative whose job is crisis management? I called my father. 37 seconds after impact, you called your father's chief of staff. You spoke for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. What did you discuss in that call, Ms. Hartwell? I don't remember exactly. I was upset. Sarah's voice hardened, just slightly. You don't remember the conversation you had 37 seconds after killing a human being? The conversation that led to you driving home instead of stopping? That led to a vehicle detail crew being dispatched to destroy evidence? You don't remember any of that? Objection. Pemberton was on his feet. Counsel is testifying, not questioning. Sustained. Ms. Chen, ask questions. Don't argue facts not in evidence. Ms. Hartwell, in the 6 hours between the time you killed Miguel Santos and the time you were arrested, how many times did you express concern for the person you'd hit? Madison's mouth opened, closed. I don't know. Not once, according to every person interviewed. Not to your father, not to your attorneys, not to the police when they arrived. Your first questions were about whether you'd be charged, whether you'd face jail time, how this would affect your social standing. Isn't that true? I was scared. You were scared? Miguel Santos was dead. His wife was identifying his body at the morgue. His children were learning their father would never come home. And you were scared about facing consequences? Is that your testimony? Madison's carefully constructed mask shattered completely. Her face went from red to white, her voice rising, sharp and defensive. You don't understand what it's like. You have no idea the pressure I was under. Everyone expecting me to be perfect, to never make mistakes. This was a mistake, an accident. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt, but someone did get hurt. Someone died. And instead of taking responsibility, instead of calling for help, you made a phone call to protect yourself. You went home. You showered. You let the evidence be destroyed. And for 3 months, you've sat in this courtroom acting like this trial is an inconvenience in your schedule. Have you shed a single tear for Miguel Santos? Objection! Pemberton's voice was loud now. This is harassment, Your Honor. But before Judge Monroe could rule, Madison exploded. She stood up in the witness box, her voice cutting through the courtroom like breaking glass. You want me to cry? For some construction worker? You want me to pretend like this isn't all completely ridiculous? My father is the governor. Do you understand what that means? My family has more influence in this state than you could possibly imagine. We know senators, congressmen, Supreme Court justices. This whole circus trial is just for show. Everyone in this room knows I'm going to walk out of here because that's how the world actually works. People like me don't go to prison. The courtroom erupted. The gallery gasped collectively. Maria Santos stood up, shouting something in Spanish through tears. Reporters started frantically typing. Pemberton grabbed Madison's arm, trying to get her to sit down, his face pale with horror at his client's self-destruction. And Madison kept going, the words pouring out like poison finally released. You think justice matters? You think any of this matters? My father's already made calls. He's already talked to people. This judge, she pointed at Judge Monroe, her finger shaking. This judge can say whatever he wants, but the reality is that my family controls more than you people can understand. We control appointments, we control funding, we control verdicts. So go ahead, pretend like this is real justice. But we all know I'm walking out of here and going back to my life because that's how power actually works. The silence that followed was absolute. Madison stood in the witness box, chest heaving, face flushed with rage and what might have been triumph, like she'd finally said what she'd been thinking all along and felt liberated by it. Richard Pemberton had his head in his hands. The jurors sat frozen, some with their mouths open, all staring at Madison like she'd transformed into something toxic and revealing before their eyes. Judge Elias Monroe had not moved during Madison's outburst. He sat perfectly still, his hands folded on the bench, his expression carved from stone. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried through the courtroom like a closing bell on the day the world ends. Ms. Hartwell, please sit down. Madison sat, something in Judge Monroe's voice cutting through her rage, reality beginning to creep back in. Judge Monroe leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on Madison with an intensity that made her shrink back in her chair. In 32 years on this bench, I have presided over thousands of cases. I have seen criminals of every variety. I have seen people who committed terrible acts out of desperation, out of rage, out of circumstances that broke them. I have seen remorse and denial, fear and defiance. But rarely, and I mean rarely, have I seen such a profound display of contempt for human life, for the law, and for the very concept of justice, as you have demonstrated in this courtroom. He paused, letting his words settle like sediment in water. You stood in that witness box and told this court, told this jury, told Maria Santos, who sits in that gallery having buried her husband, that you believe you are above the law, that your family's power entitles you to kill without consequence, that Miguel Santos's life, his 26 years of work, his 29-year marriage, his 3 children, his hopes and dreams and love for his family, all of that means nothing compared to your privilege. Madison's face had gone white. Your Honor, I didn't mean— You will not speak unless I ask you a question. Judge Monroe's voice cut like a blade through steel. You have spoken quite enough. Let me be exceptionally clear about something, Ms. Hartwell. Your father is indeed the governor. Your family does indeed have connections and influence. You do live a life of tremendous privilege that most people in this country could never imagine. All of that is true, but none of it, absolutely none of it, places you above the laws of this nation, the laws of this state, or the authority of this court. He let that statement breathe before continuing. You believe your family controls verdicts? Let me educate you about how justice actually works. This jury, these 12 citizens, will determine your guilt or innocence based solely on the evidence presented in this trial. Your family's influence ends at my courtroom door. Your father's political power does not reach this bench. And when this jury returns with their verdict, and I have no doubt what that verdict will be after your performance here today, I will sentence you according to the law, without consideration for your last name, your father's position, or your belief that you deserve special treatment. Madison's lawyer stood. Your Honor, if I might request a recess. Sit down, Mr. Pemberton. Your client has revealed exactly who she is, and this court has heard it clearly. Judge Monroe's gaze had not left Madison's face. Ms. Hartwell, you asked if I wanted you to cry for some construction worker. Let me tell you about that construction worker. Miguel Santos came to this country with nothing. He learned a trade. He worked 2 jobs, not because he had to, but because he wanted to give his family a better life than he'd had. He saved money so his daughter could go to college, something he never had the opportunity to do himself. He carried a birthday card in his lunchbox because he loved his child enough to think about her even during his work break. He crossed a street legally, following every rule, harming no one, and your choice to drink 7 cocktails and drive 60 miles per hour through a red light ended his life. You call him some construction worker, like his humanity is measured by his occupation? His worth is infinite compared to the emptiness you've displayed in this courtroom. Judge Monroe stood, his robes falling around him like judgment itself made cloth. The jury will now deliberate on the charges of vehicular manslaughter while driving under the influence, leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death and obstruction of justice. But before you do, let me remind you of something crucial. Wealth does not determine worth. Power does not determine justice. And privilege does not grant immunity from consequences. If you find this defendant guilty based on the overwhelming evidence presented, and I believe you will have reaffirmed the single most important principle of American jurisprudence, that all people, regardless of status or station, are equal before the law, that nobody, no matter who their father is, no matter what connections they claim, is above justice. He looked at Madison one final time. Your family does not control this verdict, Ms. Hartwell. The law does. And you are about to learn what that means. The jury deliberated for 47 minutes. When they returned, every face was set with the same expression, certainty without doubt. The 4 persons stood, a retired teacher named Margaret Wilson. And when Judge Monroe asked if they'd reached a verdict, she said simply, "We have, Your Honor. How do you find the defendant on the charge of vehicular manslaughter while driving under the influence? Guilty. On the charge of leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death? Guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice? Guilty." Madison collapsed into her chair like a building with its supports removed. Richard Pemberton closed his eyes. Maria Santos sobbed openly, her children surrounding her, holding her up. The gallery murmured with satisfaction and relief, the sound of people witnessing justice delivered when they'd feared it might be denied. Judge Monroe scheduled sentencing for 1 week later. That week felt like holding breath underwater, waiting to surface. The media coverage was relentless. Governor Hartwell made one public statement, asking for privacy for his family during this difficult time, his face haggard, years added overnight. Madison remained in custody, her bail revoked after her outburst, held in county jail where she learned rapidly that privilege ended, where prison cells began. On sentencing day, the courtroom was even more packed than during the trial. Every seat filled, people standing in the back, reporters from national outlets covering what had become a referendum on justice and privilege in America. Judge Monroe entered, sat, and surveyed the room with those patient, measuring eyes. "Before I impose sentence, Does the defense wish to make any statement? Richard Pemberton stood, his voice lacking its usual polish. Your Honor, Ms. Hartwell is a young woman who made terrible decisions that resulted in devastating consequences. She has expressed remorse. Several jurors shifted skeptically, and asks for the court's mercy. Ms. Chen, does the prosecution wish to be heard? Sarah Chen stood. The prosecution recommends the maximum sentence allowable under the law. This defendant's actions demonstrated a complete disregard for human life. Her behavior during trial showed a lack of remorse that was staggering, and her belief that her family's influence would shield her from consequences must be answered with absolute clarity. It will not. Judge Monroe nodded slowly. Ms. Hartwell, please stand. Madison stood, her designer clothes replaced with jail-issue orange, her hair pulled back without product or style, her face showing the reality of a week in custody where nobody cared who her father was. For the first time in the entire trial, she looked small. She looked scared. Judge Monroe looked at her in silence for what felt like an eternity. Then he spoke, and every word landed like a sentencing of its own. Madison Hartwell, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers of vehicular manslaughter while driving under the influence, leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death, and obstruction of justice. These are serious crimes reflecting serious moral failures. But beyond the legal violations, your conduct in this courtroom revealed something perhaps more troubling, a fundamental belief that other human beings have less value than you do, that their lives matter less, that your convenience, your comfort, your freedom from consequences outweighs their right to exist safely in the world. He paused, his voice dropping slightly but losing none of its force. You killed Miguel Santos through a series of choices. You chose to drink excessively. You chose to drive while intoxicated. You chose to check your phone instead of watching the road. You chose to run a red light at dangerous speed. And when you struck him, when you looked back and saw what you'd done, you chose yourself over him. You chose to protect your reputation rather than save his life. Those choices define who you are far more than your last name ever could. Judge Monroe lifted his sentencing document. Under the vehicular manslaughter charge, I sentence you to 15 years in state prison. Under the charge of leaving the scene, I sentence you to 5 years to run consecutively. Under the obstruction of justice charge, I sentence you to 3 years, also consecutive. That is a total of 23 years in state prison. You will be eligible for parole review after serving 85% of your sentence, which is approximately 19.5 years. Madison swayed on her feet. Her attorney grabbed her arm to steady her. 23 years. She'd be 46 years old when she became eligible for parole. Her youth, her privilege, her belief in her own invincibility, all of it crashing down like a house built on sand meeting the tide. Additionally, Judge Monroe continued, I am recommending to the state's Attorney General that they investigate the attempts to obstruct justice by other parties, including potential charges against those who attempted to destroy evidence. This court will not tolerate corruption at any level, and anyone who participated in attempting to shield you from consequences should face their own reckoning with justice. He set down the document and looked at Madison directly. I want you to understand something, Ms. Hartwell. This sentence is not punishment for being wealthy or privileged. This sentence is appropriate for your crimes and your complete lack of remorse. If you were anyone else, any other defendant, the sentence would be the same. That is justice. Not your family's influence, not your father's position, not your belief in your own superiority, just the law applied equally as it was always meant to be. Judge Monroe's voice softened, just slightly, taking on something that might have been sadness. I hope that in the years ahead, you come to understand the magnitude of what you took from Miguel Santos's family. I hope you develop the capacity for empathy and remorse that you've shown no evidence of thus far. I hope you emerge from prison as a person capable of valuing human life beyond your own convenience. But whether you do or not, you will serve this sentence because justice demands nothing less. He struck his gavel once. This court is adjourned. Madison was led away in handcuffs, her face blank with shock, her attorney already whispering about appeals that would go nowhere, that would fail the way all her privilege and power had failed when confronted with simple, clear justice. Maria Santos watched her go, watched the woman who'd killed her husband and shown no remorse finally face the consequences she'd believed herself immune to, And though tears still ran down her face, there was something else there too. Not satisfaction, not happiness, but a sense that the world had been set right in some small way, that her husband's life had been recognized as valuable, as worth defending, as worth avenging through law. The media coverage that followed Judge Monroe's sentencing reverberated across the nation. The story became a touchstone for conversations about privilege, justice, and accountability. Governor Hartwell's approval ratings plummeted. 3 staffers were eventually charged with obstruction of justice. The political machine that had seemed so powerful unraveled when confronted with the simple fact that they'd tried to cover up the death of an innocent man to protect someone who believed herself above consequences. Judge Elias Monroe never commented publicly on the case beyond his courtroom statements. He didn't need to. His words from that bench said everything that needed saying: that justice isn't for sale, that power doesn't grant immunity, that every human life has equal worth regardless of occupation or bank account, and that the law applies to everyone, or it applies to no one. Madison Hartwell sits in prison now, her privilege reduced to nothing, her influence erased, learning day by day what it means to be treated like everyone else, to be accountable, to face consequences without escape routes paved by family connections. Miguel Santos's family still grieves, still carries the wound of his absence. But they carry it, knowing that his death was not ignored, was not swept aside, was not rendered meaningless by money and power. He mattered. The law said so. Justice said so. And Judge Monroe made sure the world heard it clearly. If you believe that justice should truly be blind to privilege and power, show your support by hitting that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel because we bring you stories that prove no one, absolutely no one, is above the law. And leave a comment below with justice for all. Or tell us where you're watching from, because this story of accountability and consequence matters everywhere. In every courtroom, in every community, where people are fighting to ensure that equality before the law isn't just a promise, but a reality. Justice doesn't belong to the powerful. It belongs to everyone. And today, in Judge Monroe's courtroom, everyone saw exactly what that means.